Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Internationalie podcast. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about the podcast. So, the Internationalie podcast is going to be a space where different international students, prospective ones, as well as current international students, could get a glimpse into the life of international students in the US or abroad. This week, I am joined by my very dear friend, Weza. Welcome to the show, Weza.
Hey, thanks, Ruth. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, of course. So before we delve into our episode today, let me talk a little bit about your background. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So Weza is currently building a goldsmith company in Switzerland with a strong focus on sustainability and blockchain technology. He gave a TEDx speech with insights in his personal entrepreneurial journey. Technology can enable justice within the jewelry industry. Weza is currently completing a double master's degree with a Master of Science in International Management and a Master of Arts in International Law and the Managing Climate Solution program at the University of St. Gallen, where he also founded the Africa Association, leading with the purpose, generation, and mind. He's a member of the World Economic Forum, Global Shapers Community, Zurich Hub, and was most recently elected as the Youth Ambassador for Climate Change at EC22. Weza mostly focuses on psychological spheres and writes a memoir, The Power of Perspective Taking, about emotional intelligence and its success factors. On a personal note, Weza is Angolan and Italian and grew up in Switzerland and is always seen dancing since 15 years, being a salsa and bachata dance teacher in Zurich. Would you like to add more to your bio?
I think that's pretty in a nutshell who I am.
Yeah,
So
very, very
thanks for the bio.
interesting background. Yeah, thank you so much. So as the topic of our episode today is dealing with emotional intelligence, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word emotional intelligence?
Ooh, nice. So I personally love the concept and the overall topic of emotional intelligence. For me, it's just a crucial aspect of a human behavior that kind of involves the ability to understand, but also manage and express emotions effectively in oneself, but also in another. So
Right.
for me, it just goes beyond just recognizing emotions and includes also using kind of awareness to build meaningful relationships, make informed decisions, and navigate social situation with empathy and compassion. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
that's
really like that. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, even for me when I think about the word emotional intelligence, I think about like, having an awareness of your own emotions, but also, having the discernment to recognize how to deal with your emotions as well as to recognize other people's emotions, right? So, as we're talking about, as a context, being an international student or a student in general, studying abroad, how has, emotional intelligence helped you now as a student?
Yeah. So I would say a lot. So as a student, I would say the emotional intelligence skill set played a significant role in my student life. It kind of impacts various aspects, kind of communication, as I told before, but also leadership, resolution, and also overall well-being, I would say.
Yeah. So when were you like first introduced to the idea of emotional intelligence? Because for
Yeah.
me, I think I came across the concept while I was in college. I wasn't really familiar with what that meant before
Yeah.
then. How
Yeah.
was that for you?
So I read it as a concept in a book called Atomic Habits. Well, I
Ah,
think the Adam Grant didn't mention it by
yeah.
purpose, but I kind of felt through the lines what he
Mm-hmm.
meant by that. And for me, but I kind of felt it way before, and it was due to my, I think, personal background, being half Italian, half Angolan, kind
Right.
of, and then growing up in Switzerland, right? So three
Mm-hmm.
clusters and dealing with them and kind of managing how to actually control all of those, you know, emotions, but also worldviews. I think it comes down to those worldviews. And that's what emotional intelligence is then for me, to kind of understand and control and behave then to a certain point and situation.
Right. And you raised a lot of important points there. You talked about your identity, multiple identities, and how, emotional intelligence has helped you navigate through that as a student. Do you maybe, have instances or like stories where like the fact that you were, able to recognize those emotions and deal with them helped you as a student?
Let me think. So for sure, I will break it down in two aspects. So one is being an international student going abroad, because I think the most of them, or the ones who are privileged to have this chance, I would say they experience kind of this little or even bigger culture shock, right? And I think using that concept and using that skill set in your subconsciousness just helps you to adapt faster and better in a new environment. I think it comes down to adapting yourself. So this is one aspect, going abroad as a student. And then secondly, I would say as a student, you constantly, in the environment of learning new things, concepts, formulas, right? And I think it comes down there as well, kind of adapting yourself and using emotional intelligence in order to kind of immerse yourself within these new spheres. So to give here a specific example, I don't know if you have a class of chemistry or biology, or let's say history class, to understand what went wrong or even right during the World War II, right? So not just coming with your worldview, but just understand and use emotional intelligence in order to actually realize what really happened during. So those two examples.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. The reason why I asked you is because I feel like, the term emotional intelligence could be, quite big and, very hard to deconstruct and make it really, really specific to, the experiences of students. So that's why I wanted to like really, break it down and try to understand what that means. And for me, personally, when I went, when I was in college, I was an international student from Ethiopia. A lot of people in my classrooms, I was mostly probably the only few Africans in the classroom. So, a lot of the discussions that were happening, I needed to figure out a way to represent not only my country, but also the continent. So it felt, there was a lot of pressure to be, the spokesperson, because you're the only, whatever box you fit into in that space. So how was, your college experience? Did you experience something like this as well?
College, when was college? Like 7 years ago,
It could
right?
be grad school, honestly. You could talk about your grad school experience too.
I mean, maybe just to follow up on your question, was it then a feeling or an experience that you had it on a constantly basis, or was it just like one time?
I think it depends on the situation I was in. I think, whenever I found myself in those situations where I felt like a minority, I would feel it. But then if I surrounded myself with a group of friends, who are Ethiopian or who are international, I didn't feel it as much. Yeah.
So I think in my case it was slightly different, because I think due to the fact that, again, I grew up kind of with really 3 different cultures, I never felt the differences anymore. Also, when I traveled around or just got to know another person from a completely different cultural background. But I think it comes again down to this adaptiveness, kind of adapting yourself. So what I did, and what I constantly, just if I observe myself, I always constantly adapt to my counterpart. So whenever someone is speaking louder, I speak louder. Whenever someone is speaking slowly, I speak slowly, because to build this connection, right? Because at the end of the day, we are interacting with human species, right? And mastering this kind of skill set of emotional intelligence. And now it sounds kind of, I phrase it in a kind of evil way, kind of mastering this skill set, right? But it isn't. It isn't. It's just, it helps you behave and navigate and control yourself and your counterpart. So to answer your question, I never felt really in a situation where I felt a minority, because I constantly adapt myself. But now growing up and getting older, I realized, there's still a lot of situations where diversity is lacking, that's for sure, especially here in
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland as well.
Mm-hmm.
Enforcement, like, they're doing their best when it comes, for example, in a corporation or at school. But yeah, I think it's just a slightly moment where you realize, oh, maybe you're the only black student here or black person
Right.
in this room. But
Mm-hmm.
then it just vanishes because
Mm-hmm.
I constantly remind myself, hey, adapt yourself, kind of try to use this emotional intelligence skill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I think you raise a very important point about, like, we as human beings, we're very adaptable. So even when you
Yeah.
move to a different place, you go to a different country, you find ways of, assimilating yourself into that, culture and environment. And, the other side of my question that I wanted to ask you is, so
Mm.
if you didn't have those skill sets, if you didn't recognize what emotional intelligence was, how would your experience have changed, and how you navigate your life?
Ooh, I like this question. Um, I can imagine that in certain situation, I just felt maybe an outsider. I just felt not understood, or I personally don't understood certain worldviews or situations.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, maybe I just completely would have evolved to a different personal
Mm-hmm.
character, right?
Right.
I would describe myself now being really world mind open and
Mm-hmm.
extroverted, due
Mm-hmm.
to the fact that I kind of, I would say, master this social skill. Um,
Right. Right.
but yeah, definitely. So definitely, a different person, a different Weza. Yeah.
Right, right. And the reason why I asked this question is because for someone who's not really familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
or like what it takes to, really recognize your emotions, and then, um, and how like that would help you in your interactions with people, I feel like without it, you'd be missing a lot of things that you would otherwise not be missing. So, for instance, even for the fact that, um, I think I want to relate it more with like networking and like how you can interact with other people, because you are very aware of, your emotions, and you know what, you want to get out of the interaction you have with other people. So in
Mm,
terms of like networking, for instance,
mm,
I feel like even talking about how we met, reached out, because, of Global Shapers, and like, we
yeah.
met for a day, but I, that really it was a very interesting interaction, because like networking could go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what I learned through our interaction as well, like, because you like, honestly, like, and I feel like that not a lot of people do that, and it's
Mm,
very rare for reach out to someone and then just meet them and then that's it. But I feel
mhm.
like you take it a step further. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I, yeah, it makes totally sense, and kind of
Yeah.
reminded me now exactly the situation where we met, right, a few months
Right.
ago when I just arrived in Addis Ababa, had a
Right.
layover of 18 hours, and I was like, let's reach out to the
Exactly.
shapers here. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it has also to do being, yeah, open-minded, definitely. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
this is totally a different discussion now, having or mastering this emotional intelligence skill set. I mean, we could go hours and hours talking about that, but
Right.
I feel like you raise a really good point, kind of for someone who encounters this concept or this word for the first time. I would just
Mm-hmm.
break it down to three main words, which
Okay.
one is kind of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So within self-awareness, I understand one's emotion, the strengths, the weaknesses, the values, and the impact on others, but also
Yeah.
self-regulation, which in my view
Mm-hmm.
isn't really the same thing. So self-regulation is more managing and controlling emotions, avoiding impulsive behavior, for example, and
Right.
adapting to changing circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Circumstances. And I realize we both keep saying the word adaptive.
Right.
So I feel like, and maybe because I'm writing this memoir, right, about
Mm-hmm.
this concept, and I
Yeah,
think I
let's talk
didn't,
about that.
yeah, I didn't
How's
use that
that going?
much this word. Actually, no, I actually use it a lot now that I realize I'm talking to you in this podcast. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, it comes also down to, I mean, when I think of adaptiveness, I think, and connected to emotional intelligence, I think of empathy. I think this is a word where you can't skip in this discussion. So empathy, sensing and understanding others' emotion, perspective, and feelings, right? And here, maybe what helps for a new joiner within this kind of worldview is ask always the difference between what would I do in your role, in your shoes, kind of you as a human being, like you with your background, your understanding, etc., etc., or what would I do in your situation? Because it's different, right? What would I do in your shoes, but what would I do if I would be in your situation? So this is completely different, because then it's about me with my worldview, with my learnings, with my experience, right?
Right.
I think those are the two points to differentiate, beginning with this concept of empathy, right? And then now that you raised the point and touched on the memoir, which I personally label it as the power of perspective taking.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't know when I came up with this kind of, for me it's kind of a maxim that I live up to. It's kind of a profound concept that emphasizes the ability to step into someone's shoes,
right,
to understand their thoughts, feelings, experience, and view the world from their point of view. The power of perspective taking goes beyond mere empathy in my case, as it requires actually active engagement and genuine effort also to comprehend others' perspective fully. Yeah.
Exactly. And thank you so much for sharing that. I hope you get to finish that book and I get to read it. I'm very, very excited about that. But yeah, you touched upon the importance of empathy and trying to understand what other people are going through, but then also the fact that our perspectives are different, and actually recognizing that people have different sets of experiences, different sets of perspectives. Having an appreciation of that, I think, is really, really important when you are an international student, because I feel like a lot of times when we grow up, we tend to be very, one-sided, or, being open-minded doesn't come as easily until you are faced, in a situation where your ideas and your perspectives are challenged. And I feel like it requires a different level of self-awareness to understand that it's not always a bad thing for someone to have a different perspective than you, especially in the world now. Everything is so polarized, and but I feel like we tend to learn a lot more with each other if we have different perspectives at the end of the day. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And again, you mentioning being an international student, right? I think it comes then handy, first of all, using this kind of concept, but also it kind of evolves during traveling. So traveling is definitely a driver and accelerator in terms of developing this emotional intelligence skill, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you are in a different environment, going outside your comfort zone, going outside your home university and home place. So that's definitely something you encounter. But then realizing actually that this is a powerful toolkit, this is a different story then.
Exactly. I feel like going through it is one thing, but also like having that recognition, like, oh, okay, this is actually what's happening, is another level. But you touch upon a very important point about like traveling, which I want to highlight. I feel like the fact that you have the opportunity to travel and meet a lot of people inevitably makes you emotionally intelligent, and I feel like that's a very good point that you raised. It's really important. But yeah, is there any aspect of emotional intelligence that we didn't touch upon that you wanted to raise?
Maybe just deep diving actually into two main components once again, just to fully understand for also the listeners what it really means, or what I understand. And so the two components, right? For example, so there was this self-awareness, self-regulation, right? So kind of it begins within you, but also this empathy, so understanding one another. So the first thing, I feel like when I approach now arguments or disputes, or just someone that has a different perspective, I don't anymore just encounter the situation with, oh, what would I do in this situation, or I completely think different. So the first, really, the first thought I personally have is how, and also if I totally disagree with that person, in my head it was like, how in the hell,
Right, right.
how the hell does
Yeah.
this person comes to this opinion, to this mind? So it's not about judging anymore. It's not about no, I counter now. So it's about really first understand how is it possible that this person has a completely different worldview. Is it because they grew up in a different environment? Is it because just right now they don't have a good day or something like this?
Right.
Because something fascinating, Ruth, isn't it, that we are the same race, we're the same creature, we are a
Right.
Homo sapiens sapien. Actually, it's so fascinating. I
Right.
mean, think of it. It's so fascinating. We're just living like at the other side of this social created borders, and we completely think different on certain topics, right? Just
Right.
because, I mean, it's incredible. So
Yeah.
for me, again, it's something that it's taught. It's something that it's comes with evolving, that this person, this counter self, believes in something different. So
Yeah.
that's why the first thing when I encounter someone is really, hey, how could it be that this person thinks different? Or so this
Right.
is the first thing. And then just to touch quickly on the second thing, so which was understanding someone. I think there is a method which I came across last year student and studied
Right.
at ESADE in Barcelona. There was this one
Mm-hmm.
teacher. There's also a TEDx talk about it. It's called
Okay.
Socratic dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe you've heard of it. So
Right.
Socrates, in brief, was this Greek philosopher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his main concept was just he constantly talked to people, but his
Yeah.
method was actually just asking questions, no interference with his own opinion
Yeah.
or just judgment. And
Right.
I think it's so powerful because we trained at 6 months. I can recommend it to everyone.
Mm.
It's such
Whoa.
another toolkit, but maybe you
Yeah.
can implement it also in one of your in your podcasts. Just
Right.
asking questions and not adding your thoughts, because
Opinions. Interesting.
interestingly,
Yeah.
you really see, first of all, you 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 just listen, so you learn how to listen effectively,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't instantly judging or instantly come up with your mind with your in your head. And secondly,
Yeah.
you really, she described it like this, giving birth to new ideas. So she really,
Mm-hmm.
it emphasized you to help your counterpart to come up with their own views, solutions, or whatsoever. So I think
Right.
Socratic dialogue is the first initial step I would dig deeper into if someone is interested in
Interesting.
the second
Right.
component, kind of understanding someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you so much for that insight. And I feel like even I feel like in law schools they use the Socratic method where they just like randomly ask you questions, and then you have
Yeah.
to like answer. So I feel like even in my podcast, I feel like I always like also relate with what the guest is saying, and I'm trying to come up always with like a story to share or something. But I think it would be very interesting to just like
Yeah,
ask,
right.
the questions
Yeah,
and not
yeah.
have a
And then
response
you
in
dig
mind.
deeper and dig deeper. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think you touched upon a very, important, aspect of emotional intelligence and how, there's, diversity of thought. I think the beauty of, being human beings is the fact and different understanding about the even though we're all living here. And I feel like there is, as you said, there is a method to understanding people because I feel like not everyone is as accommodating to like differing points of views, and I feel like that should be more normalized than it is. That's just my opinion. But yeah, as we're ending our conversation, do you have any
Yeah.
advice for international students who are dealing with the topic of emotional intelligence?
Ooh, okay. Let me break it down to one main advice. So while being international students going abroad, definitely keep this concept of emotional intelligence in your subconsciousness, meaning being just open-minded and take new things, completely new things, in action to and change them into action. Meaning, yeah, like you said, I just did a layover in Addis Ababa and just and I didn't just hang out at the airport. Why not just reaching out to global shapers? Because this is the first step, increasing your emotional intelligence, increasing your worldview. I mean, I've learned so much through you, Ruth. I mean, we did so many things, no? I mean,
I know.
it was just 18 hours. We went on this event, and we went eating, and you showed me. You remember, for example, this spiritual place that you showed me.
The church.
I learned so much. And by the way, you reminded me the other day because you gave me this jewelry gift. Do you remember?
I do.
Yeah, you reminded of me. So, but maybe slightly different topic. So the best advice, being open-minded, keeping this emotional intelligence concept in your subconsciousness, and trying to use the concept of Socratic dialogue, definitely. So please go on YouTube, try to research more about it. It's really, it's not time consuming, and I've learned a lot through it.
Thank you so much, Weza, for sharing that. And I also second everything you said. I can't stress enough the importance of being open-minded when you're an international student. I think that was one of the things that really helped me while I navigated my college experience. And as you said, all the resources that you mentioned, everyone just go check it out. But so thank you so much, Weza, for being a guest. Thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise.
So as a last minute housekeeping, please make sure to go follow the official Instagram page at Internationalie by Ruth, that is LIE, and send an email with your questions or concerns about being an international student to internationaliebyruth@gmail.com. Thank you again for tuning in today. I hope you have a lovely week ahead of you, and take care of yourselves, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.